إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. So I'm not using any microphone here, but for the live streaming part, yeah. So this way, if anybody wants to grab a chair to make yourselves more comfortable, get closer, whatever your comfort level is, grab a chair so you can sit closer. It's all good, inshallah. There's no problems at all. We're going to leave that until I give the heads up, then we'll connect it. So what that is the external battery is to charge the actual camera battery once it gets to like about 50% or so, just so that this way we don't have the errors of what's happened in the past, that it cuts out, before anything is done, of whether it's a khutbah or a class or anything of that sort. Alhamdulillah, the AV system, the new AV system, it's almost finished. And with that being the case, alhamdulillah, one of the things that we're going to ask, and Brother Mahfoud, Amin Mahfoud, who was just talking to me, Allah bless him, who's the main person from the board, communicating, working with the company that's doing all of this, he's going to need some volunteers to learn how to use the system. And so if there's any of you who, alhamdulillah, have some time and some technical, know-how to volunteer, and it doesn't mean you'll have to be the same person who volunteers all the time, etc. But there'll be the opportunity and you can work out whatever is good for you in your schedule. It would be great because we need it. Because otherwise, part of what happens is that if it's going to be left to one person or two people, they're going to get burnt out. They're going to have other types of commitments. They're not going to be here. And then it ends up that, we no longer have whatever it is that's happening in the masjid available to whoever else it is that's outside the masjid. Benefiting from technology is good. When we utilize these tools for things that please Allahu Rabbul Alameen, that's an act of worship for us. And so alhamdulillah, when we have it, we should make the most of it. And we hope and pray that it counts as a sadaqatun jariyah, that it is a continuous charity, because anyone who benefits from whatever it is of good that happens from it, that'll be something that, so long as the technology, the work and so on and so forth, that bidhnillahi jalla wa ala, for however many years to come, that'll be something that you'll continue to receive rewards and blessings. And although you may not have contributed, for example, to the system financially, but by contributing your time and contributing that know-how of how to work the machine and how to record it and live stream it, bidhnillahi rabbil alameen, that'll be something that Allah Azza wa Jal will and can only bless you with and reward you with. So tonight we are on the 9th ayah from among the ayat wherein Allah Azza wa Jal is still calling the believers, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, and we're still in Surah Al-Baqarah. So up to now we have 9 ayat, and what I hope to do is that after we finish up with the ayat that are in Surah Al-Baqarah, we're going to take just those ayat and we'll make them available and see if maybe somehow post it on my bulletin, or maybe put it in a, the Jummah announcement newsletter or something of that sort. Or if you have ideas, and here's where for me it would be great, if there's from you those who alhamdulillah have ideas and have some skills and whatnot, creativity, share them. Share them so that as a team, perhaps the impact we can have will be greater, will be better. And this way it also allows for you to have an opportunity to get involved and to volunteer in a way that is meaningful. Now, this is not just for those of you that are sitting in front of me. That could also be the case for those who may be watching online or whatever the case is. If you have skills, I'm calling for volunteers. I'm asking for help. Please help in whatever capacity you can. Jazakumullahu khairan. So tonight, the 9th ayah, it's in Surah Al-Baqarah. And Shaykh Abu Bakr al-Jazairi rahmatullahi alayhi, he titles it, في وجوب إخراج الصدقة من طيب المال وحرمة إخراجها من خبيث. the imperativeness of giving your charity from the best of your wealth, and the prohibition to give it from the least desirable of your wealth. And the ayah for this is قوله تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا أنفقوا من طيبات ما كسبتم ومما أخرجنا لكم من الأرض ولا تيمموا الخبيث منه تنفقون ولستم بآخذيه إلا أن تغمضوا فيه واعلموا أن الله غني حميد. Allah Azza wa Jal says, my computer is stuck, okay, unstuck, good. He says, Jalla wa ala, O you who have believed, be mindful of Allah and give up what remains. No, that's the other one, hold on. It skipped on me, I'm sorry. O you who have believed, spend from the good things which you have earned and from that which we have produced for you from the earth. And do not aim toward the defective therefrom, spending from that, while you would not take it yourself, except with closed eyes. And know that Allah is free of need and praiseworthy, subhanahu. So, الشرح قال الشارح رحمة الله عليه اعلم أيها القارئ الكريم أن هذا النداء الإلهي الرحيم يحتوي على ما يلي من التعاليم الإلهية المسعدة للإنسان المؤمن المزكية له وهي. He says, have knowledge, know, beware, or be aware, generous reader, those of you who are listening, those of you who are attending and learning, that this divine call that is merciful, that it contains within it divine teachings that will bring happiness to the believer, and it will also purify them. What are these teachings? There's several. The first of them, وجوب إخراج الصدقة من طيب المال. That it's a command for us that when we give our sadaqah, that we give it from the best of our wealth, or that we give it from what is good from our wealth. And as we'll come to see what some of that means. When you think about dollars, for example, there's no such thing as a better dollar from a worse dollar, unless you're looking at it and say, well, this one has less wrinkles on it or otherwise. So what they're really referring to is with regards to the other categories of wealth, in the sense of what you have of cattle, what you have of harvests, from those especially. That you can have, for example, mashallah, a healthy sheep that is, mashallah, one that if you were to put it in a contest, it would win a prize. And then you have, on the opposite spectrum, the one that if you were to want to give it away for free, you might find somebody who will take it. Right? The believer is not supposed to be the one who looks to give the worst of it away. The believer, the true believer, is the one that should look to give the best away. But even if they're not going to give the best, they should be able to give that which is next best or third next best, which is still from the good of what they have. The second teaching, حُرْمَةُ إِخْرَاجِهَا مِنْ خَبِيثِ, that it is a prohibition, that it is actually haram that you give your sadaqah from that which is khabith. Now khabith in this case is عكس طيب. It's the opposite of tayyib. So if tayyib is that which is good, that which is wholesome, khabith is that which is not good, that which is rotten, that which is bad. You have, mashallah, good quality grains, and then you have those that were unfortunately afflicted with maybe too much water, and perhaps they're a bit, who knows what. Maybe they have some fungus growing on them, they're old, whatever. And this is something that honestly goes back to the person who deals with these things, who can really tell. Why? Because if you ask me to differentiate between sheep, I couldn't tell you a male from, well, I can tell you a male from a female. That's about all I could do. Right? But I wouldn't be able to tell you the better quality from the least quality. Or when it comes to grains, the same thing. I wouldn't be able to tell you. But this is why it comes to, again, the obligation of sadaqah being between the person and Allah Rabbul Alameen. Because they know, And for sure Allah Azza wa Jal knows. What's the third? بيان وجوب الزكاة مما كسبه المؤمن من الأنعام. That we're also here given details and clarification telling us that it's mandatory to give zakah with regards to cattle. That the believer, if they have acquired livestock, that they must also give zakah for the livestock. What is cattle? What is livestock? What are these categories that if a person has them, they're supposed to give zakah? We're told, هي الإبل والبقر والغنم. Camels, cows, and sheep. Now with regards to camels, you have camels and you have those that are in the camel family. Somebody may say, like what? Well, you have a one-humped camel, you have a two-humped camel, right? But then you also have llamas that they say are from the camel family. Okay, you have cows. Well, you have different types of cows. You have longhorn cows here in Texas. If you go to, for example, maybe in Albania, they don't have those types of cows. They have maybe smaller sized cows and who knows what. They have water buffalo, they have this, they have... So different countries have their different versions of cows or the cow family. All of that is included. Sheep. Different forms, different types of sheep, and also included with sheep are goats. So anything of the different sheep, goats, rams, mountain goats, whatever you call them. All of those. إن بلغت النصاب وحال عليها الحول. So the same two conditions for the zakah are there even with regards to these cattle. That it must reach the bare minimum, the threshold that you have to have in order for zakat to be a requirement, and we'll come to see what that quantity is. And the second thing is that you had to have had it in holding for an entire year. So a year to pass. What else? وَمِمَّا كَسَبَهُ مِنَ الدَّنَانِيرِ وَالدَّرَاهِمِ أو ما يقوم مقامها من العمل المتداولة اليوم بين الناس إن بلغت النصاب وحال عليها الحول. And among the other things which we also acquire are gold and silver. But even more common for us today are currency that is used in place of what used to be used back then of gold and silver for currency. Whether it be dollars for us in America, whether it be rials over in Saudi Arabia, whether it be lek in Albania, whether it be, rupees, for example, in India or Pakistan, regardless. That is a currency, and so long as the same two conditions are met, that the nisab, the threshold, the bare minimum of money has been reached, and the second, that a person has had it in their holding for an entire year. Good. The fourth teaching, بيان وجوب الزكاة من الخارج من الأرض. That we're also given the command, being taught, that we have to give zakah, we have to pay the alms for that which the earth produces. And he goes on to tell us, وَهُوَ الْحُبُوبُ كَالْبُرِّ وَالشَّعِيرِ وَالذُّرَّةِ وَالزَّيْتُونِ وَالزَّبِيبِ وَالتَّمْرِ. He says, and these are the likes of different grains, such as wheat, barley, oats, corn. And he even then mentions zaytun, which is not a grain, but rather it's what? Is it a vegetable or fruit? I don't know either, to be honest with you. But olives. And he then mentions raisins. Well, raisins are what are produced from what? From grapes, right? And then he also mentions dates. Now, dates are the dried form of what otherwise would be the balah and the different forms of fruit that are produced on date palms. He says, إِن بَلَغَ نِصَابًا. So the first condition for these things is to understand that if it reaches the required threshold. And the second is وَكَانَ مُقْتَاتًا مُدَّخَرًا. that it would be considered in and of itself food. And it's something that can be stored, something that it's non-perishable. So when you look at grains, you could easily store those, right? Including, for example, corn. And I didn't realize this except up in Illinois, where subhanAllah, they would grow a lot of corn. And they would leave it until October, sometimes November, and they would leave the corn husks and everything, the ears, everything as it was. And I had asked the farmer once, why? Why don't you harvest it like in summer? He says, we allow for it to dry in the husk, on the ear, while it's still there, so that come fall when we reap it, that it's dried and it's perfect. So subhanAllah, there's a science to this. How are olives stored? They go bad. How are you supposed to, how are they including olives in this? There's a pickling process where they may store it either in the oil of the olives itself, or they pickle it in some other different form. So in this case, what we're looking at is the storage, the preservation of whatever the crop is, so that it can be consumed and it is considered to be food. So when he's mentioning these things, it's not all inclusive to say, well, it's only dates, olives, therefore nothing else is really included. And of course, raisins and dates, which are easily dried. He then says, أما ما لم يكن مقتاتا كالفلفل والبصل والثوم فلا زكاة فيه. He then says, rahmatullahi alayh, as far as the other crops that are not considered as food, and he then mentions peppers and onions and garlic, he says there's no zakah upon them. So I don't know, to be honest with you, if maybe this is just the Sheikh's position, because according to what in Saudi Arabia, and more specifically in Medina, that these are not things that are necessarily grown, they're not stored, they're not considered food. But if you go to Albania, peppers, they eat that stuff every day. And they mix it with, garlic and onions, and they'll saute it, they'll add cheese, they'll put it with bread, they'll serve it to you in so many different ways. That's food. So part of what I want us to understand from this is that with regards to fiqh, part of what we want to be able to do is refer it back to especially where we're living. Why? Because if you ask me about in Zaire, something about a crop or something about a fiqh issue, honestly, in order for me to even be accurate in trying to address it, I have to understand it. There's a principle in fiqh that says, الحكم على شيء فرع عن تصوره. To give any type of a ruling on something, that's the result of being able to have a comprehensive understanding of the matter at hand itself. Well, to be honest with you, who's going to have a better understanding of that matter? Me in Dallas, or for example, the ulama in Zaire? Naturally, the ulama in Zaire and the ulama in any country that specifically this particular matter is related to. Right? So, with regards to these different types of crops, mangoes, bananas, you're talking about multi-million dollars with regards to a lot of these things. Pineapples, you name it, coconuts. How do you deal with it? Refer it back to the scholars in those countries and they'll tell you. They'll tell you whether or not the crop itself, in the same way that the grains, etc., are to be looked at as an nisab, and therefore you give whatever it would be, or that you're just going to look at it from the aspect of the cash, and whatever there is of money, that it's just from the money aspect of it that you're going to then give zakah. Kind of like if we looked at وَمِمَّا أَخْرَجْنَا لَكُم مِّنَ الْأَرْضِ, from that which we have produced for you from the earth, oil. How do we deal with oil? Do we look at oil and say, you know what, it's petroleum, It's not something we eat or drink, nor is it, wealth. It's not gold, it's not silver, therefore there's no zakah. Talking about $1 trillion business. What do? Well, that's where the scholars look at it. And they will look at it, they can address it. And if any of you have oil wells in your backyard, we can further ask about those things. But otherwise, it's not about creating loopholes. And this is important for us to understand. No one should look at the giving of zakah as though this is something of a punishment or something of a fine, and therefore we're looking for loopholes. How do I get out of it? Rather the opposite. If we bring it back to what the ayah is saying, from what Allah Azza wa Jal has provided for you of what is good, in all of its different forms. So this is a way that we worship Allah Azza wa Jal to give. He then goes on and says, وَكَذَلِكَ مَا لَا يُدَّخَرُ وَإِنْ كَانَ مُقْتَاتًا كَالْبَطِّيخِ وَالْقِثَّاءِ وَالرُّمَانِ وَالطِّينِ وَالتُّفَاحِ وَالْبُرْتُقَالِ. And he mentions, in addition to what is not considered to be food, he gives a category to say that which is food, but you can't store it. So the Shaykh is looking at the likes of watermelons and cucumbers in the cucumber family, squashes, etc., pomegranates, figs, apples, oranges. He says you can't store them. Well, you can and you can't, right? You can store them if you look at refrigeration for some time and they have a shelf life. But then if you look at drying them in the way that many other things of raisins and dates are dried, dried fruit is subhanallah. But anyway, he's saying that there's no zakah. إلا أن يستحب التصدق من كل خارج من الأرض مما لا تجب فيه زكاة لعدم توفر شرطي الزكاة فيه وهو الاقتتات والادخار. He says, except that it is still highly recommended and encouraged that you give charity.
Sister asking where is the sound?
We've asked the sisters to come. Okay.
I can ask them to come here if you want to.
Why don't you do that if you don't mind? Huh? Oh, here, let me see what the battery's like. Yes, hold on. Let me tell you. It's at 70%. So let's give it just a little more time, inshallah. It should be on.
Is that stand?
That's okay. If you wanted me to use that, I would suggested that they should just come down. But if they don't want to come down, we can
ask them to come down.
We can use the microphone. Yeah, if you want to just say it on the microphone.
Okay.
That'll be easier, inshallah. Yeah.
Sister, if you would like to come, to the main prayer hall behind the mass, you are welcome to come in. The Imam has approved that you can come in behind the mass hall.
Jazakallah khair, thank you. Barakallah feek. So he's telling us that even though something may not fit the conditions for it being zakah eligible, that it's still highly recommended and encouraged to give charity. So how would you give charity? Imagine, for example, you're in Texas and you can grow figs. How would you give charity? You'd wash a nice big bowl of them and you'd bring it to the Imam and say, Imam, here's some figs from my backyard. And I would be so happy. I'd make some dua for you and I'd enjoy those figs and I would look forward to the next time that you bring them. So even though there's not a zakah to give in charity of whatever it is that you produce, that is always encouraged. And mashallah, I know there's some brothers and maybe even sisters who, with regards to what they grow in their backyard, sometimes they'll actually bring them and they'll put them out on the table. Squash, different types of tomatoes and things of that sort, who knows what. And alhamdulillah, that's a good thing. What else? He says, and he reminds us what the two conditions are with regards to crops. Al-iqtitat, al-iqtiyat, that it is considered food in and of itself, wal-iddikhar, that you can store it. So these are the two conditions that the fuqaha have given for something to be zakah eligible. Of course, once it fits those two conditions, then you must have the minimum threshold and have it in your possession for the year with regards to when you're supposed to offer it. But otherwise, to see whether or not that crop, that thing is considered zakah eligible, it must be considered in and of itself sustenance, food, and the second, that it is storageable. He then says, هل تدري ما نصاب هذه المزكيات أيها المؤمن أو المستمع? He now begins by asking us, do you have any idea of what the zakat quantity is for these things? So he's now going to call our attention to the quantities. He begins with the first category, and that's with cattle. He says, إنها في الإبل خمس من الإبل. With regards to camels, if you have 5, that's the nisab. That's the minimum nisab. وفي البقر ثلاثون بقرة. And with regards to cows, the minimum is 30 of them. وفي الغنم ضأنا أو ماعزا 40 شاة. And with regards to sheep or goats, 40 of them. That's the bare minimum. So if you have less than 5 camels, less than 30 cows, so you could have 4 camels, or you could have 29 cows, you could have 39 sheep and goats, no zakah. Subhanallah. But once it reaches that number, then. Somebody may say, well, why? Well, because it's deen. That's what the Prophet ﷺ gave us of a number. And so that number is in and of itself intended. So what happens, let's say for example, mashallah, you have acres of land here in Dallas or in Texas someplace. And you have 39 goats and sheep. There's no zakah. But are you still encouraged to give sadaqah? Sure you are. So even though you don't have to give zakah, you could still take, for example, one of those sheep. You can give it away for somebody. You can slaughter it yourself, butcher it, give it away to people. Right? You can do that. Sadaqah is always open. We're talking specifically though about the zakah. He then says, وَفِي الْحُبُوبِ وَالتَّمْرِ خَمْسَةَ أَوْسُقٍ. He says then with regards to that which is of grains and seeds and things of that sort, and he mentions also within it dates, that it is 5 awsuq. That's a measurement, a quantity, al-wasq. And he says, وَالْوَسْقُ سِتُّونَ صَاعًا. One wasq, that it is 60 sa'. Person may say, well, okay, what is a sa'? He's giving us measurements that were used in the time that the Prophet ﷺ measures. He says, وَصَاعُ أَرْبَعَةُ أَمْدَادٍ أَوْ حَفَنَاتٍ. One sa' is 4 handfuls. So 4 handfuls equal, oh man, sound pollution. 4 handfuls equal 1 sa'. 1 sa', you need to actually have 60 of them to equal 1 wasq. And the quantity of what you need are 5 awsaq or awsuq with regards to the grains and so on and so forth. How much is that in today's terms? We can look at that inshallah if we have some time. And I brought one of the fiqh books to give you what that equals in grams. Now the Muslim world, they use grams because the majority of the world has switched over into the metric system. And it's interesting, it's bizarre. They say that America was a pioneer in pushing scientifically to have the world standardized on the metric system. And when everybody else got on board, America didn't. Why? I don't know. وَفِي الْعُمَلِ قِيمَةُ 70 غَرَامًا مِنَ الذَّهَبِ. With regards to wealth in the form of gold, if you have 70 grams of gold, then you need to give zakah. He then says, أَرَأَيْتَ أَيُّهَا الْقَارِئ. And he leaves out what there's also of silver and some of that other stuff. But the issue of zakah is one of those things that every person specifically should address what their circumstances are so that they can have whatever their needs are to be fulfilled. He says, أرأيت أيها القارئ إن قيل لك عرفنا النصاب في الأنعام لكن ما عرفنا كم الخارج منه. He now poses another question. He says, what if it were said to you, we know what we're supposed to give with regards to what the categories are of zakah with regards to cattle and what the limit, the threshold is, but we don't know how much we're supposed to give. فلعلمه أن من ملك خمسا من الإبل زكاها بشاة من الغنم. So if you have 5 camels, what are you supposed to give? You're supposed to give a sheep or a goat as the zakah. Now a person's going to sit there and say, kind of like me, because I'm a city slicker, I don't know anything about this sort of stuff. So how does he get a sheep or a goat if he's got camels? Right? Well, it turns out that these folks, they don't only have camels. They have camels and they'll have sheep and goats because camels are like the top prize. So if he's got the wealthiest of cattle, they're also going to have the least of them, which is going to be like your goats and your sheep. And that's why you'll find that in almost all of these cases, what they are going to be given is from the sheep and from the goat, except in the case of the cows. He then says, وَمَنْ مَلَكَ عَشْرًا زَكَاهَا بِشَاتَيْنِ. And if you have 10, you then give 2 sheep and goats. وَمَنْ مَلَكَ خَمْسَ عَشْرَةً زَكَاهَا بِثَلَاثٍ. And if you have 15 camels, you give 3. وَمَنْ مَلَكَ 20 زَكَاهَا بِأَرْبَعِ شِيَاهٍ. And if you have 20, you give 4. And I'm going to pause for just a second. I'll be honest with you, I remember in our 3rd year of fiqh, the blessed Shaykh Muhammad Mukhtar al-Shinqiti, Hafidhahullah Azza wa Jal, who is considered now from Hayat Kibar al-Ulama in Saudi Arabia, he taught us in our 3rd year. And that 3rd year he was going through some transition, so I should have had him for 4 periods a week, pardon me. I had him for 2. And as he was teaching us this stuff, I'm coming from New Jersey, I don't even see chickens. And they're going into this stuff in some depth and whatnot. And I said, Sheikh, honestly, in America, I don't deal with this sort of stuff. I don't deal with crops, whatnot. I said, how about we focus on stuff that for me in America is going to be more relevant, stocks and bonds and all of these other types of money and instruments. And he basically said, look at yourself and the rest of the students in this class. You're the only Westerner and everybody else is coming from Africa, from Asia. You don't need it, but they do. So I said, he's got a point. So I shut up and I tried listening and learning. But the challenge I had, and I feel that, and perhaps because of that I'm projecting it onto you, is that if none of you were having anything of sheep and of cows and of camels, as we're going through this, you're probably sitting there thinking, what the heck do I need to know this for? You know what I mean? This is knowledge, but for you to be very honest, it may not be beneficial. But what I've come to see is that here in the Dallas area, some of our brothers, mashallah, they actually have land. And on that land, mashallah, they got cows. They got sheep and goats. So I'm thinking, oh, subhanallah, man, these guys are like cowboys over here, they've got land and they've got cattle and whatnot. Those people, yes, they should know what the zakah is. They have an obligation. And if there's farmers from among them too, where they're growing crops, they need to know what the zakah is. But to be honest, for the rest of us, you may sit there and you'll be thinking, just finish this because, doesn't matter if we have 5 or 10 or 20 because we don't have anything anyway, so what's the point? The point is that this is the lesson. Sometimes the lesson is something that has to be taught, even though for you it may not really be that relevant. And I apologize. So the stock, no stocks in this one, brother. No stocks, no retirements, none of that other stuff. So let's hopefully move on. He says, ومن ملك 25 زكاها ببنت مخاض أو أوفت سنة ودخلت في ثانية. He then goes on to say that once they reach 25 camels, they then are supposed to give a baby camel. And that baby camel is basically about 2 years old. Now to tell you something, a baby camel is worth, at minimum here, right? You're seeing what the value of that camel is compared to the sheep. A baby camel, you're talking about really here 4 or 5 sheep, right? And even then it's really not an equivalent. But he then says, وَإِن مَلَكَ 30 بَقَرَةً. He now moves on to the cows. وَجَبَ عَلَيْهِ فِيهَا عِجْلٌ يَتْبَعُ أُمَّهُ أَوْ فَسَنًا. With the cows, if they reach 30 cows, they have 30 cows. SubhanAllah, look at that. 5 for the camels, 30 for the cows, and the difference between cows and the sheep and goats is just a difference of 10. To tell you what a camel was with regards to them. A camel is like your 18-wheeler truck, and the cow, it's kind of like your SUV. And the sheep and goats, I don't know, like a compact car. So the Prophet ﷺ made that statement, encouraging and motivating the believers to be a source of guidance for others. لَأَن يَهْدِيَ اللَّهُ بِكَ رَجُلًا وَاحِدًا. Said, if Allah guides by you even one man, and it's not just a man, it could be a woman. خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنْ حُمْرِ النَّعَمِ. That it is better for you than a whole valley of prized camels. You can understand that you're talking about an exorbitant amount of wealth. Because a camel wasn't something that a poor man had. A camel was something that the wealthiest of these people had. Right? And if we could put it in modern day terms, we would say something like, if Allah Azza wa Jal were to guide one person through you, it would be better than a parking lot full of Lamborghinis. It would be better than a dealership of Ferraris. It would be better than a truckload of Bugattis. If you know what those cars are, I'm sure all of the guys do, right? So for the cows, if you have 30, it's a baby cow. It's a calf that is a year old. Why is it in this case that it's not a sheep? Allahu A'lam. But the Prophet ﷺ in these cases, that's what he mentioned, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And he goes on to tell us with regards to the explanation, وَمَنْ مَلَكَ 40 مِنَ الْغَنَمِ وَجَبَ فِيهَا شَاةٌ. If you have 40 goats and sheep, what are you supposed to give? Just one sheep or one goat. Nothing. SubhanAllah, anybody here know how often these animals reproduce? I don't either. But most of the time it's more than once in the year. And in doing so, you'll find that a lot of the times, so the camels and the cows for the most part, they'll produce one offspring, but the sheep and goats, a lot of the times it's 2. And so you're talking about something that could easily be a cash crop in the sense of how quickly they're able to reproduce and to multiply. Right? He says, وَمَا زَادَ عَلَى مَا ذُكِرْ يُطْلَبُ مِنْ كُتُبِ الْفِقْهِ الْمُطَوَّلَةِ وَهَذَا جَدْوَلٌ مُخْتَصَرٌ لَهَا. He says, and whatever is more than that, he says you can look for that in the books of fiqh that go into details with regards to it. And he gives us a schedule here. We won't go into the schedule. Is that okay with you, or do you want to go into the schedule? We can plug that in now if it's okay. Yasin or Nabil or whoever. Should we go through the schedule, brothers? We can skip it. I agree with you. He says, وَاعْلَمْ أَيُّهَا الْقَارِئُ أَنَّ مَا بَيْنَ الْفَرِيضَتَيْنِ يُسَمَّى وَقْصًا. He now goes to a different aspect of what we should pay attention to. You notice how he goes up from numbers of if you have 5, 10, etc. in between those thresholds, there's a quantity. The Arabic Islamic term for it is a waqs. And he goes on to say, وَأَنَّهُ لَا زَكَاةَ فِيهِ. And there's no zakah. So for example, the camels, it's 5, 10, 15 in increments of 5. So if you have 9 camels, you still don't have to give anything of zakah. Once you reach the 5, yes, you're supposed to give a sheep. But the next time you give it is only when you reach 10. So you have 6, you have 7, you have 8, you have 9, no zakah. It reaches 10, you then give it again. And the same thing is true with the quantities for the cattle, of cows, and of goats and sheep. And believe it or not, when you look at the goats and sheep, the next time you're supposed to give zakah on them, it jumps to 121. So from 40 to 121. And what do you give of zakah when you reach 121 goats and sheep? 2 of them. SubhanAllah. Right? I mean, part of what I think we should really be able to recognize from this is that Allah Rabbul Alameen, He's not looking to strip us of all of our wealth. 2.5% is nothing. And if we can try to imagine it, 5 camels, you give a sheep as though that sheep is 2.5% of the value of what those camels are. 30 cows, a baby calf, it's as though that one baby calf is 2.5% of the net wealth of those 30 cows. 40 goats and sheep, that one sheep is as though it's 2.5%. Wallahi, brothers and sisters, what is 2.5%? I mean, those of us that live here in America, we know that Uncle Sam takes from us in the 30s, right? And for some people, even less if you're wealthier. Right? Because the wealthier you are, the less that's taken from you. And the better your accountant and so on, the more that they have of different things to protect your wealth. But the middle class and the poor, subhanallah, especially the middle class, they bear the biggest of all. 30%, 30-something percent. And Allah Azza wa Jalla is only asking for 2.5%. What else? He says, فالعدد ما بين 40 إلى 120 وقص لا زكاة فيه أي معفو عنه فاذكرها ولا تنسها فإنه لا بد منها. So he's calling our attention to once again saying that these ranges, anything in between them, that all of that is, it's pardon, that nothing of zakah is required on it. He says, so remember that, learn that, don't forget it, because this is something for the person who's dealing with it, it's mandatory. He then moves on to, with regards to the other part of the ayah where Allah says, he says, وَهَذَا وَهَلْ فَهِمْتَ مِنَ النِّدَاءِ قَوْلَ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى وَلَا تَيَمَّمُوا الْخَبِيثَ مِنْهُ تُنْفِقُونَ. Did you understand what Allah Rabbul Alameen was calling our attention to when He said, and do not give of that which is of the khabith, of the worst of your wealth, spending, giving that. He says, إِنَّ مَعْنَاهُ حُرْمَةَ إِخْرَاجِ الزَّكَاةِ أَوَ الصَّدَقَةِ مِنْ رَضِيءِ الْمَالِ وَفَاسِدِهِ. He says that the meaning of it is to understand that it is prohibited for us to give zakah or sadaqah. Somebody may say, what's the difference? When they're mentioned separately, they're synonyms for each other. The ulama say, إِذَا اجْتَمَعَ افترق وإذا افترق اجتمع. And it sounds almost like a word game. That if and when these words are mentioned separately, they're synonyms for each other. They mean the same thing. But when they're mentioned together, there's a difference in the meanings. So more specifically, zakat is the mandatory giving of alms, and it's for each category depending on the conditions. Whereas sadaqah is general, and it's anything of what you give of charity. Clear? That it is prohibited to give it from the bad, that which is not quality of your wealth, and that which is considered to be low quality or even rotten. He says, ذاك الذي لو أعطيته أنت ما قبلته ورددته على صاحبه. How do you know what that is? He's giving us a good example. He's saying that is the wealth that if it was given to you, you wouldn't accept it, and you would return it back to the person who gave it to you. So what we're really looking at here is the golden rule. To love for your brother what you love for yourself. For with your dealings with Allah Azza wa Jal, you want to make sure that you're dealing with Allah Rabbul Alameen based on what is going to be acceptable and that which is going to be best. And then there's the inverse of that rule. That you don't deal with your brother in a way that you yourself don't want to be dealt with. Right? And we're almost done. He says, Allahumma illa an تغمض عينيك وتقبله حتى لا تغضب عليك من أعطاكه. He says, except in the circumstance that maybe you're going to take it closing your eyes because you don't want to anger or upset the person who's given it to you. Can that happen? Sure. For whatever reason, that person, you don't want to upset them, you're going to accept something that otherwise, once they leave, you're going to throw it in the garbage, for example. You're not going to take it, you're not going to use it, you're not going to benefit from it, but you're taking it only because you feel compelled or forced to. He says, وَهَذَا مَعْنَى قَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى إِلَّا أَن تُغْمِضُوا فِيهِ. Because that's what's meant by what Allah Azza wa Jalla says, except that you close your eyes in the process. وأخيرا ذكر ما ذكر اذكر ما ذكرنا الله تعالى به في هذا النداء الكريم إذ قال تعالى واعلم أن الله غني حميد. He says, and lastly, recall what Allah Azza wa Jalla is reminding us of when He tells us in this beautiful proclamation and announcement, and have certain knowledge that Allah Rabbul Alameen is the independent and He is also the praiseworthy. حتى لا تسول لك نفسك أن الله تعالى في حاجة إلى صدقة متصدق. He says this is so that none of us, the conclusion of the ayah is so that none of us has the thought thinking that Allah Azza wa Jal needs the charity from the person who's giving it. فَتَمُنُّ ذَلِكَ عَلَيْهِ, such that the person can then remind and mention to Allah Azza wa Jal as if they've done something good for Allah Rabbul Alameen. أو أن الله تعالى فرض الصدقة لأجل أن يحمد من المتصدق عليهم. Or another wrong understanding is that a person would think that in giving the sadaqah it is so that the person who is giving it would be thanked and would be praised. And that's also important to understand. You've done the good of giving that charity, you've given that wealth. It's not a requirement that the person have to now lavish you with words and say like, oh, you're so generous and you're so wonderful and you're amazing and you're like a lifesaver. And if, no, not at all. And he goes on to say to Ash-Sharih rahimahullah, لا, no, that's not at all the case. فَإِنَّهُ تَعَالَى غَنِيٌّ حَمِيدٌ بِإِفْضَالِهِ وَإِنْعَامِهِ عَلَى خَلْقِهِ حَمِيدٌ بِصِفَاتِ الْجَلَالِ وَالْكَمَالِ فِيهِ إِذْ لَهُ الْحَمْدُ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلَهُ الْحَمْدُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. He says, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Most High, is certainly ghani. Now ghani means wealthy. But part of what we also understand from that is because He Jalla wa ala is the most wealthy, He is completely independent, He is not in need of anyone or anything. And that's where we understand a person who is wealthy, that they are independent. People need them, they don't necessarily need others. But in our understanding, there's not a human being except that they're dependent on someone or something. Allah Rabbul Alameen is the only one who is truly al-Ghani, the absolutely independent, not in need of anything, yet everything depends and relies on Him subhanahu. And He's reminding us, saying that He is also Hamid. Hamid is the emphasized name of the one that is praiseworthy. And Allah Rabbul Alameen is the one who is to be praised and He is to be thanked at all times under all circumstances, because it is He who is blessing each and every person, in this case especially the wealthy, with what they have, such that they are in the category of being able to give zakah. And this is something that, unless you've been on the opposite side, you may not necessarily appreciate it. So for example, a person who is born into wealth, you have wealthy families, right? Whether they are ruling families of a country, or wealthy families who are, established in some form of a business that, mashallah, generations, old money as they call it in English. They may have never known what it was like to struggle financially. So for them, they may never really acknowledge what Allah's blessing is upon them, that it is He Jalla wa Ala that has given them that. And to be thankful and appreciative. As opposed to when you do have folks who, they came from, I don't necessarily want to say poverty, but they were not wealthy and they became wealthy. What happens? Look in America, for example, some of the wealthiest people. Bill Gates, he wasn't born rich. One of the wealthiest billionaires in the world. Warren Buffett wasn't born rich. One of the wealthiest business billionaires in the world. Mark Zuckerberg wasn't born rich. One of the wealthiest people. And so on. What are they doing? They've done something that is, wallahi, something that the Muslim Ummah should have done way in advance. They have it, I think it's called the Billionaires Club or something like this. And they have a special name for this charity that they have pledged to give 90% of their wealth as endowments to all sorts of different things. Because to be honest, can a person live off of $1 billion? Huh? 50%? Well, okay, 50%. Our brother Hani is saying 50%. So I know that Buffett and Gates and these guys, they've given, so many of them they've given in the 90s. So the minimum is 50%? 50%. And others have given even more. But think about this.
It's like if my family can survive on $2 billion, you think $2 billion is enough for them to live on?
And he's mentioning that they made a statement saying, well, if my family can't live off of $2 billion, then they don't deserve it at all, right? They're useless. There's no good in them if they can't live off of $2 billion. Wallahi, in the Muslim Ummah, there are billionaires. Are they maybe doing these things? I always want to keep a positive belief in my heart that there are always going to be believers that are going to be doing good. Do we necessarily know about them? No. Here's one of them. His name, or his tag name, his moniker is Akon. Akon is formerly from New Guinea or Senegal, one of those countries. He was a rapper. Maybe he's still a rapper, an entertainer. He has partnered with others to invest in the infrastructure in many of the countries that are there in West Africa. Senegal, the Ivory Coast, those countries. Where he has investments from China, $1 billion investment in green energy technology to bring electricity to over, I think it was 80 million people, if I'm not mistaken. It's huge. And I know that there are many others like him that are doing these good things. I would hope and pray that we can get to a point where all of us, regardless of where we are, and I pray that Allah Azza wa Jalla make us all multimillionaires. Say Ameen. Right? Especially if He knows that it's good for us. Because the upper hand is always better than the lower hand. The giving hand is always better than the receiving hand. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he said, نِعْمَ الْمَالُ الصَّالِحِ فِي يَدِ الرَّجُلِ الصَّالِحِ, wholesome, halal money is a blessing when it's in the hand of a righteous person. Imagine how much good we could do. Our Islamic schools would not be only for the rich. It would be for the rich and for those who can't afford it at all. Our masajid, we would not be struggling. We would have half a dozen crew of staff that are going to specialize in all sorts of needs. Someone who's going to specialize on needs for the elderly, someone's going to specialize on needs for the younger children, another for the youth, another for the sisters, another for outreach in this. We would be able to do so much. But we know that money is where it's at. Right? And so here's where once again Allah Azza wa Jal is reminding us that it is He Jalla wa Ala that has bestowed these things. And if only the wealthy can come to realize that, look, regardless of how you got it, Allah is the source of it, subhanah. Share it. Use it in a way that is going to further bring you closeness with Allah Azza wa Jal, His love, His mercy, His forgiveness, and an increase of happiness. Because it's not the money or what it buys that makes happiness or brings happiness or buys happiness. And I was watching just recently, and I'll conclude with this, on the Deen show, Brother Eddie, Allah bless him and the good work that he does. He made a video on the recent clip with regards to Habib Nur Magomedov, Allah bless him and forgive him and bless him to be a source of guidance and a role model for others. Allahumma ameen. He had a section in there where there were some rappers. And one of them, I don't know his name, but his face is all tattooed up and he's got his hair braided and he's showing money saying, I was broke, I was poor, I had nothing, I got all this money, but it hasn't made me happy. He's not the only one. Another one was a person by the name, and this person, his name was mentioned, Loon, who became a Muslim, subhanAllah. I forgot what his Muslim name was, or is. But the same thing. Talking about how they reached everything of what we would consider to be happiness. They're famous, they have wealth, they're traveling the world, they could have any, for example, girl, or in the case of the girls, guys, but they're not happy. Happiness is something that is an internal thing, and it only can truly happen when a person has a relationship with Allah Rabbul Alameen in a way that they found their purpose in Allah creating them, Jalla wa Ala. And this is where we're supposed to remember that Allah Rabbul Alameen is the one who has the divine attributes of majesty and of perfection, subhanahu. And for Him there's always all praise and thanks by everyone and everything that is in the heavens above, as well as in this earth. And it will continue to be that case up and through until the day of judgment and for eternity to come. And He is He is the powerful, He is the most wise. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad. And we've concluded that part. Any questions, inshaAllah? Yes, sir.
The second rule that you mentioned that it's prohibited to give from the lower quality of things that you have. Back in India, and I'm assuming parts of Asia, where people give in charity old clothes, old stuff that they have, things that they don't use anymore, but which are in visible quality. So would that be considered haram in this case?
Good question. The brother is saying in India, but it's not just in India, even in America we do this, where we give away clothes, our used clothes. Is it permissible or not? The question would be, are you giving it away just because you have more, you've bought new, and it's taking up space, you haven't worn it in a while, and there's no holes, it's good quality, etc.? If that's the case, it's perfectly fine. But if it's something that's got stains and it's got tears and who knows what, you wouldn't wear it, you wouldn't be seen dead with it, then you really shouldn't give that either. But if we're talking about, and I don't know, for example, let's say in India or maybe some other place, if we're talking about where there's real poverty, and even that which has maybe stains or who knows what, the people would wear it and they'll be happy because they don't have otherwise, perfectly fine. And this is where the ulama, the scholars in that area, their fatwa would be best sought out. But otherwise, for us, Many of the times we give away clothes, it's not because the clothes are really bad, but we buy so much. There's a sale, there's who knows what. We switch out things because we can't be seen wearing the same shirt, the same dress, the same, whatever the case is. In those cases, for us to wash it, to press it, whatever the case is, to give it, it would be perfectly fine and good. And that's something that, alhamdulillah, we are doing, we continue to do, and it's fine. Allah knows best. Yes.
Yeah, this question I cannot ask in Bangladesh or London. I think I have to ask him.
Inshallah.
401k.
401ks.
Yeah. I mean, what 401k? I don't own this until I retire. One day. Or if I want to withdraw some, I will withdraw the portion of my money, not the company money. So what is the zakat policy on that?
Great question. So the scholars tell us that with regards to zakah for 401ks or retirements as a whole, what you do is you look at the sum total of whatever it is. So let's say it's $100,000. But as you mentioned, you're not allowed to take it out. If you do, there's fines, there's penalties, there's taxes, there's whatever. And let's say that the sum total of what those taxes, those penalties are 30%, 40%, 50%, whatever it is. You minus that. You deduct that. So if the clean money at the end of the day, if I were to pull it out, I would get 70,000, 50,000. I would include that 70,000 or 50,000, even though I haven't taken the money out. Because what you include is the money that you actually would have in your possession if you were to use it, and that's what you include, nothing else. You don't include the sum total of the 100,000, only the part that would be minus whatever there would be of penalties and fees and taxes and so on. And Allah knows best. Yes.
If you were to go to the store, for example, and find spaghetti sauce on sale and you buy a bunch, you go home, you realize it has alcohol in it, you don't want to eat it. How about you don't want to give it to another fellow Muslim? Did you give this to a non-Muslim or just discard it? Or?
Great question. So the brother is saying about going to the store, buying something, and then realizing that it has alcohol in it. Spaghetti sauce, for example. Now, I don't know that spaghetti sauce actually has alcohol in it. I've never heard of it, but I don't normally do the food shopping. So, what do you do with it? I want to differentiate between what is in and of itself alcohol, like your bottles of drinks, as opposed to something that may have something of alcohol in the case of what we may consider, and we want to be certain that it's actually alcohol, because sometimes you'll have the word liqueur or liquor that's written in there, but it's not meaning alcohol. So you'll have sometimes chocolate or different things will say chocolate liqueur or liquor. So what I'm saying is the first thing is to verify that which is in a product that is not in and of itself an alcoholic beverage. Is it really alcohol or not? Because they'll mention sometimes amaretto, a name of an alcohol, scotch, who knows what of stuff. Verify, is it really that there's alcohol in there or not? How do you do that? You look, of course, in the ingredients if you can see it. If it clearly states in the ingredients alcohol, then now you want to pay attention. What is the percentage in this case? If it says 2% or less, for example, I wouldn't recommend that you use it, but instead of throwing it away, if you did give it away to somebody who is, for example, a non-Muslim, that for them it's not going to be a problem, it would be fine. In the same way, that if you bought some spaghetti sauce, and in it you found out that there's pork, you're not going to use it. But instead of throwing it away, you give it to somebody that in that case, that they would. Now this is my personal opinion and position that I'm giving. Does it mean that if you ask somebody else that they wouldn't give you a different, you'll probably get a different fatwa from somebody else. And I'm looking at it by differentiating between what is in and of itself haram, as opposed to what is going to be a small part of it in this case, so that you can, inshallah ta'ala, do something of goodness with it, nice with your neighbor, who knows what, etc., as opposed to just throwing away the money as a whole. But if, and this is another example, at work or a neighbor or somebody, they bring you a bottle of champagne, a bottle of wine, a bottle of beer. What do you do with it? You pour it down the drain. You don't give that away to somebody because that in and of itself is completely haram. Somebody may say, that's a $50 bottle of wine. That's $50 going down the drain. That's $100 champagne. That's $100 that's going down the drain. Totally different. And Allah knows best.
Can you return it to him? Sorry, I don't get it.
If you can return it back to the store, that would be the best thing.
Suppose a guest comes and he brings a bottle.
Oh, the guest. So if somebody is going to give it to you, absolutely. What you want to do is, your neighbor, your friend, your colleague, whatever, you want to educate them. So if you see that they come and they give you a bottle, and it's something you're seeing, you want to right there kind of tell them, oh, thank you so much, but I can't. Right? This way you've saved yourself from being put in that position, as opposed to it being something that's wrapped, you have no idea what it is, and then when you get home or who knows what, or when it arrives by mail, you open it up and you're just like, right? Or in the store, that if you can return it because it's sealed and they can tell, they press on the top and see that it's sealed, and if you can return it, that would also be, alhamdulillah, fantastic. Yes. And Allah knows best. Yes, Akhi.
What's the ruling of zakat on cryptocurrencies, provided they meet the requirements of
Zakat on cryptocurrency, I don't know. Most recently, during one of the MJA conferences where they were talking about this, there was still an undecisiveness with regards to even whether or not it's permissible or not. They kept neutral for the most part. And so the issue of zakah on it is also dependent on it. So I don't have any answer for you. I don't know. Allah knows best. Yeah.
I wanted to follow up with that question about ingredients in the food. So, for example, if it was like mustard or something, mustard, they have white wine in it. But my understanding is the Lord gives whatever intoxicates in large amounts, prohibited in small amounts. You wouldn't necessarily call the mustard alcohol. If I went to the store, this would be mustard. It's never been like a bottle of alcohol. If I were to drink that mustard, I would never get drunk. I might get sick. So we, is it to a point where we need to return these items, even though we may say there's an ingredient in there, but it's not anything that would intoxicate anybody. It doesn't matter what the amount of it is.
So the hadith is correct. ما أسكر كثيره فقليله حرام. That which in large quantities intoxicates, it's prohibited even in small quantities. That we're not denying, we're not saying that it's halal. The question is, what do you do with it? What's the best thing to do? If you can return it back to the store, do so. If you can't return it to the store because whatever, clearance or who knows what, they won't take it back, what do you do with it? Do you throw it away? Because it's food, it's not alcohol, it's not an intoxicant, it's food. What do you do with it? If you gave it to somebody who would benefit from it, because they're not going to get drunk or anything of that sort, it is food, I would hope that that would be a better choice than wasting it, throwing it away in the garbage. That's what I'm saying. Did I answer your question, or did you mean something else?
Yeah, I meant something.
What did you mean? I don't think I understood you. Let's give him one more chance to explain if it's okay. Good.
My understanding of hadith is whatever intoxicates in large amounts, we're talking about, say for example, we have alcohol. If I were to drink half an ounce of alcohol, it would be haram because it's alcohol. Because drinking a bottle of alcohol will get me drunk. So any lesser amount is haram by default. But this is not alcohol. It may have a minute percentage of alcohol in it, but this is food we're talking about. This is not alcohol. This is food. In the preparation of this food, they might have used some alcohol in it. Whatever, was it burnt off, whatever it is, but it was there. But when I look at that, I'm looking at food. I'm not looking at alcohol at all. Is there a difference between these two? That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so now I think I understand you. So there's certainly a difference between that which is purely in and of itself alcohol, as opposed to whatever it may be of a food product that has some alcohol in it. The question though that we want to ask is, was the alcohol introduced into it? Or, is the alcohol something that is just a natural process of it occurring because there's some form of fermentation, etc. The pasta sauce, the tomato sauce. It may naturally produce through whatever chemical process something of a small quantity. If that's the case, then we want to separate and say that if they've added the alcohol into it, no. If it's something that is producing a small quantity, and that quantity is negligible, and a lot of the times in the way that, and it's good, here in America at least, what they show to be a very small negligible quantity, they'll say less than 2%. So less than 2% is nothing. If it's something in that case where they'll say less than 2%, then I would hope and say that inshallah ta'ala in this case that you have nothing to worry about. But if a person still wanted to be on the safe side and say, well, you know what, it's alcohol, what do you call it? Give it away. But otherwise, if that tomato sauce, if that mustard, if that barbecue sauce, if that, I have no idea what the other things are, may have a small percentage that's just naturally occurring in itself because it's aging or because whatever it is, very different from it being added into it. So this is why when you talk about, for example, the aspect of going to some of these fancy restaurants and they add the wine into the meal, no. As opposed to the sauce, the tomato sauce, which is fresh or who knows. Or even some of the smaller ones. You're correct. The beer batter, for example, for the fish and stuff. Correct, and that's not a fancy restaurant. In that case, well, if you don't know, what you don't know won't hurt you. But if it says on there, beer battered, chicken or fish or something, then you want to ask them, is that real beer that you batter it with? And if they say yes, then you say, okay, I won't have that one then. And Allah knows best. We'll take another question maybe, and then we'll go ahead and close up. Go ahead.
Regards to the interest that is contained in our checking account or saving account. So what is the best way to get rid of it? Should we just give it to someone or?
Great question. What do we do with interest that we have within our different bank accounts? So the first thing is this, that to the best of my knowledge, a checking account is not supposed to be an interest-bearing account. It should be 0%, it should be interest-free. A savings account, yes, that will have something of interest that you'll get from it. So the checking account is permissible, the saving account isn't. However, if you want to, excuse me. If you went to, for example, Whittier Bank, and you said to them, I want to open up an account, a savings account with you, their model is one that is an investment. So you're going to get money from it, whatever the percentage is, etc., but it is different, it is halal. Why? Because their model is a model that has been verified by scholars to say that the transactions are not one of loaning money and making money off of money, rather it's investing. And a person, if you don't understand it, there's going to be some similarities between things in the business world, but this is where the specialists recognize these things. So if it is that a person, for example, has a regular savings account that's collecting interest, what they should do is switch out of that. What they have collected of interest on that, they should give it away as sadaqah. But what the scholars tell us is that they should not have any anticipation of receiving anything of reward and blessings because it's not an act of worship for them. The other question is now, what should they do with it? Should they tell the person that they, whoever they're giving it to, that it's from that? Not necessarily. Not necessarily, especially if it is that they're repenting from this, they don't want, you should not expose yourself. So to get out of it. To open up a regular checking account where you're not getting anything, if you're a person who's not making much money, so it's kind of just, whatever goes in comes out, it would make sense. But if alhamdulillah, you're a person who's making good income, I would recommend maybe going to something like with your bank so that you can put money in the bank and have them invested for you in the different portfolios of what they have. And in doing so, you go ahead and you get something of profit from it so that your money is not just sitting there without any type of benefit. Or even better than that, you may want to look at some of the different wealth management people that we have. And alhamdulillah, we have Muslims. One of them is one of the brothers who's a local in our masjid, Yatmir Ahmeti, for example, Ahmeti Wealth Management. Talk to him, say, hey, I want to invest in some halal investments. What do you have for me? And he'll be able to work with you on something like that so that you can build your money, you can work it, as opposed to just having it sit nothing in that sense. And Allah knows best. And with that, I hope and pray that Allah Azza wa Jal, who is the most merciful, our provider and sustainer, that He provide for us that which is halal, tayyib, in quantities that keep us obedient and devout to Him, as well as grateful to Him, and that also bless us to be generous with each other. I ask Him Jalla wa Ala that wherever there is somebody in need, that He subhanahu provide for them, and that He bring people into their lives that are going to be able to help them. And ask Him Jalla wa Ala that He forgive us for our shortcomings as a whole. Allahumma ameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad. Wa akhiru da'wana an alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa iyyakum.